Now the next part of this little problem here is figuring out how do I get that cardboard texture to reappear. So it's kind of a strange issue because when we scale the image down, I think most of us kind of think that this is working like Photoshop, where if you had like a new layer and you had a texture, and if you just scaled it down, you would normally see through to the stuff behind it. That's just kind of how Photoshop works. And most layered programs do that. This is just a little different. So it'll kind of take a bit to sort of retrain your brain to kind of think this way. But with Maya and the Mila material, when you scale something down, what you're doing is you're scaling the texture's color down. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're scaling the entire layer down, because this layer is covering everything. And you can kind of see the problem even back on the original texture file. Like, see how that image is really tiny? And by scaling it down, we kind of introduced all this strange gray color around it. Now, what is that? Well, what is happening here is on the file node, when you scale something inside of Maya, Maya still has to fill it with something. There has to be something out there in the empty space around the file. So that is under color balance, and it's called default color. And you're going to kind of see this come up a few different points throughout the month, but default color is going to be the color that Maya picks anytime it can't figure out what is supposed to be there. Whether it's cropping an image, scaling it, translating something off the 0 to 1 space. This is kind of like Maya's backup plan. So that's going to be used to fill all the empty space. Now, how do we really fix this? Well, what I want to do is I don't need to change the color. I'm very happy with the color. The problem is the weighting, because watch what happens if I turn the weight to 0. If I do that, actually I think I have solo on. Let me turn that off just for a second. There we go. That was causing my material viewer not to update, but if you kind of look at this guy again, with weight at 1, you get that gray and that sticker. Sticker's in here somewhere. Actually, I can barely see it right there. But if you turn it down, you can see what's behind it. So this is the key. There has to be something controlling weight. So what we're looking for here is to create an alpha to tell the diffuse layer where it appears visually, like where is it opaque, and then where should it have been see-through to the layer behind it. So it's almost like you're in Photoshop. Imagine you were making a mask. What if I wanted to cut out everything outside of the white? So it's like a rectangular sticker. I need to figure out a way to make a white rectangle with black around it. Because remember, black, as far as alphas and masks go, black means see-through or it doesn't affect anything. So white rectangle, black around it. And it has to be in the same location as this guy. That's another big part. How do I do that? Well, what I need to do is first go over here in the Hypershade and try to figure out how I make just a white color in general. We're going to right-click. I can do Create Node, and you could go in here and kind of look through your options. You know, I got checker patterns, ramps. I don't really see a solid color. I think we could do a ramp in this case. So I'm going to make a ramp. Okay, where'd that guy go? Okay, there's my ramp. Let's just move that over here somewhere. Okay, so I have a ramp. Now I want to make it solid white. Okay, so now it's a solid white texture. So that's good. Now I need it to be in the same location as well. So the location has to do with the placement node. So remember how we moved all these numbers, like the scale, translation, we rotated it a little bit. That's what moved the file in that spot. I need this little alpha I'm building to be in the exact same location. Now I could take those numbers and copy it into this one, and it would definitely work. It'd be perfect. The only problem with that is if you just copy the numbers, this means any time you move the image, if you had an art director say, just shift this a little bit to the left, now we're going back and you're typing in numbers in 2 different nodes because they have to match. So a better way to do this is, since we know we're doing node editing, what if I had this placement node also control that guy? So what I can do is take this one and delete it. Now notice how it says out UV to UV. That's the only important connection. So what I'm going to do is delete this guy. And now I'm going to drag the UV down to UV on this thing. And again, that might take a second to update. Actually, you can already kind of see it. There it is. So by connecting it, that's now kind of rotated and small up in that same location. But remember what I was saying before about this needing to act like an alpha. We have the white rectangle working in the right spot. What color should that be? That needs to be black. So that is going to be on the ramp. You go down into color balance, and there's that default color. Remember, that's what Maya uses outside of the file or the texture anytime it can't figure out what is going on. So we're going to take default color, slam it to black. And now you can see we've basically made our own little alpha inside of the hypershade pretty quickly. So if we go back over here, let's go back to the shader, the material. There's the weight. So remember, 0 and 1. 0 weighting means you don't see anything. 1 means you will see everything on the layer. Let me kind of compare that to our file, or our ramp. Okay, so 0 or black means you won't see that layer. That's perfect. 1 or white means you will see the layer. That's exactly what I want. So I'm pretty sure this is going to work. So we're going to go over there. I'm going to middle mouse drag this new ramp to the weight on our diffuse reflection layer. Let's try doing a render, and we'll see if that works. We're going to keep that as a reference, re-render that one more time. Awesome. Yeah, this is working just like we want. So notice by getting that alpha set up and telling the diffuse layer where it's visible by setting up that little weight texture, we've now cut out all the gray. And it actually looks kind of cool because we have a diffuse sticker going right over top of that, the two glossy and diffuse layers beneath it with the cardboard. So that's not too bad. Now, what if I wanted to change one small detail? What if I needed to cut out the white? Now, this can be a little tricky. Sometimes you could do color remapping. So you know how we had done the little luminance node and the ramp, and we could kind of play around with the contrast on that to turn a color file black and white. So I could like use color remapping to hopefully make this a black and white image where it's white in the middle, black on the outside. The only reason why this might not work is because you can kind of see how the gray in her hood and over here on the label, that's really close to this guy. There's a good chance that if I can get this to turn black, it's going to accidentally cause these areas to turn black. So if this is transparent and see-through, there's going to be a see-through shape right there. Her hood will be see-through. So sometimes color remapping just doesn't work. And I think it's going to be one of those cases where it probably won't, and I'm going to want to build this in Photoshop. So let's try that out. We're going to go over here to Photoshop. Let's do open. I'm just going to go find that particular file. Okay, so source images, there's the Eskimo pie. Now, what you would probably do is just make a black and white image. And I'll show you some ways to do this. There's a lot of ways, so don't think this is the only method. But since I have like this kind of flat color on the outside, I'm going to try using the color wand. Just kind of sample the white. It's not too bad. Now you notice like at the edge quality, see how that goes right up to that little rough piece of paper? It looks pretty good. If you ever feel like it's not really selecting the color the way you want, you could change the tolerance. Now if I had a finer tolerance, like 1, and did the same thing, you can kind of see how it's actually barely hitting that, and it's super, super sensitive. If I had a higher tolerance, like 90, and did the same thing, notice how it now eats away at it. So let's put this back to 10. Just kind of experiment with that. Okay, pick that. We're going to back up. Now what I want to do is turn this to black. So we're going to make a new layer. I'm just going to simply go to Edit, Fill with Black. Command D, deselect everything we just selected. That's looking pretty good. So that kind of goes over top of that. Now if I hide the texture layer, see how we just have this random black layer right now? I'm just going to make a new layer beneath it and then simply go to white and then paint bucket or use a fill and just paint white in there. So you have a white layer with this kind of mask thing we built with the wand tool of black over top of it. And from here we could just save that as our JPEG or a Targa, and that would be pretty good. I have a couple small pockets in here where little bits and pieces are showing up, so I could take a black brush and kind of just paint those out real quickly. But I think you kind of get the idea. You could do it through marquees, lassos, whatever you think you have to do, but just make the alpha in Photoshop first, and then we're going to try using that in Maya. Okay, so back here, I want to basically replace this ramp with a new cutout. So let's try it out. We're going to right click, create node. Now this time I would need a file, right? So you can make a file or just hit tab, type in file texture. So make a file. Okay, this thing is kind of got thrown all over the place. So there's my placement node. And I'm just going to grab that 2D file, move that over here. So really the big adjustment is instead of me using that little ramp, I want to replace it with this custom image I just made. So I'm going to go over here. We're going to load that in. So Eskimo Pi Alpha is what you would have saved out of Photoshop. I want this to be in the same location, just like the ramp. This is not any different. This should be driving the file. So we can delete that guy, drag out UV to UV. So now that puts that in the same location. So you can see they're basically the same thing. It's just one is a little ramp, one is going to be the file. Notice how there's gray around it. We know what that is. Go to the File, Color Balance, Default Color to Black, and look at our little alpha. So the only thing we've got to do now is go back to that material, and instead of using this guy to drive the weight, because that's what's causing it to cut out the rectangular shape, if I just simply drag this to weight, let's delete the ramp, because I guess we're done with that guy. So now that's controlling it. This should work. Okay, so we're going to keep that. Let's just marquee over this and just verify that it's working in the render. Okay, interesting. Nothing happened. It seems exactly the same. Now that's kind of weird, right? Let me look at this thing in the viewport. What's going on over here? Huh. Okay, so there's that. Let me see if I can preview the whole material. It might not work, but let's try it out. Let's do solo. Okay, that's not showing up, so it's not able to draw that for some reason. But let's back up here. Let me just try looking at a solo on just the alpha file. So this is the weird part here, is I can tell that it's reading the image, but it doesn't seem like that's translating into the material at all. And it's a very strange problem. Now, this is something that's just going to happen a lot. It's not broken, but this will pop up quite a bit. This is a problem with the connection. So see how this file is doing something called out alpha? So it's using an alpha channel from this to drive the weight on the material. This doesn't have an alpha channel because we're using a JPEG. So what's happening is, since this file node's out alpha can't find an actual alpha channel, what it's doing instead is it's taking it's basically making its own alpha channel and just filling it with solid white. So because it can't find an alpha, it's just making a solid white rectangle instead. So that's the problem. The way to get around this is if you make a black and white image that's supposed to be used as an alpha connection, like we're doing right here, just turn on alpha is luminance under the color balance. When you do that, it'll tell this output to use the color channels as the alpha. That's a really small difference, but most of the time, if you're making black and white images, I would just turn that on autopilot just to avoid the hassle, because most of the time, you probably do want that on. So let's render that one more time. This is just hitting that checkbox. Perfect. So now you can see that we're also cutting that out by using our little JPEG image we just saved out of Photoshop. So that's basically it. You know, as long as you guys get the image in the right spot, and then you kind of know what type of effect you want to do with the cutout for the alpha, it should be pretty straightforward. Just use that 2D placement node, and then connect that guy to the weight on your diffuse layer on the Mila material.